Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The windshield wipers were losing the war against the torrential downpour, slashing back and forth like a metronome, counting down to Julian's death. He didn't check the speedometer. He didn't care that the luxury sedan was hydroplaning on the slick asphalt of the coastal highway. Nor did he care that he was driving a vehicle worth more than most people's houses into the heart of enemy territory. All that mattered were the two identical car seats in the back, where Leo and Luca slept, blissfully unaware that their father, their alpha, had signed their death warrants the moment he unzipped his pants for another Omega. Julian's knuckles were white against the leather steering wheel, his breath coming in jagged, terrified gasps. The image was branded onto his retinas, a nightmare he couldn't blink away. Dante, the man he had loved for 5 years, the dawn of the Valenti crime family, tangled in the silk sheets of their marital bed with the heir of the rival triad. It wasn't just adultery, it was a political merger. And in the hushed, post-coital whispers Julian had overheard from the slightly ajar door, the truth had shattered his world. Julian was a liability. The twins were bargaining chips to be sold to the highest bidder to cement the alliance. Not my babies, Julian hissed, the Omega instinct to protect overriding the submissive conditioning Dante had instilled in him for years. You won't touch them. He swerved off the main highway, tires screaming as he took the exit toward the Iron District. It was suicide. It was madness. It was the territory of the Volkov Bratva. No Valenti associate had ever entered the Iron District and lived to tell the tale. But Julian wasn't going there as a Valenti. He was going there as an offering. The iron gates of the Volkov estate loomed out of the darkness like the jaws of a beast. Julian slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt inches from the reinforced steel. Immediately, floodlights blinded him. Red laser sights danced across his chest, and the back headrests where the twins slept. Julian threw the door open and stepped out into the freezing rain, his hands raised high. He was drenched in seconds, his silk shirt clinging to his shivering frame, but he didn't falter. I am Julian Valenti, he screamed over the roar of the thunder, his voice cracking. I demand audience with Nikolai Volkov. A silence heavier than the storm descended. Then, the heavy grinding of gears echoed as the gates slowly groaned open. A solitary figure walked out into the rain, flanked by 4 armed guards. He was a mountain of a man, dressed in a pristine charcoal 3-piece suit that seemed impervious to the weather. A long, black wool coat hung over his shoulders like a cape. His face was a landscape of sharp angles and cold brutality, marked by a thin, jagged scar running through his left eyebrow. His eyes were the color of glacial ice, cold, unfeeling, and devoid of mercy. Nikolai Volkov, the butcher of St. Petersburg, the man Dante feared more than God. Nikolai stopped 3 feet from Julian, looking down at the shivering Omega with an expression of mild boredom mixed with lethal curiosity. Valenti's little pet, Nikolai's voice was a deep baritone, smooth as velvet wrapped around a razor blade. You have 5 seconds to explain why I shouldn't paint my driveway with your blood before I assume this is a suicide bombing attempt. He betrayed me. Julian choked out, water dripping from his eyelashes. He plans to sell his own children. I have them. I have the heirs. Nikolai's gaze flicked to the car, then back to Julian. And you brought them to me? The man who swore to wipe the Valenti bloodline from the earth. I brought them to the only man strong enough to kill Dante. Julian whispered, his legs finally giving out. He sank to his knees in the mud, bowing his head. I offer you my life. I offer you his secrets. Just save them, please. The silence stretched, agonizing and thick. Julian squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the bullet. Instead, he felt a warm, heavy weight settle over his shoulders. He looked up, stunned, to find Nikolai's wool coat draped over him. The Alpha was looming over him, but the scent radiating off him wasn't the metallic tang of blood Julian expected. It was sandalwood, rich tobacco, and a deep, earthy musk that made Julian's Omega inner wolf whine in confusion. Get up, Nikolai commanded, his voice devoid of warmth but lacking the cruelty of before. If you die of pneumonia on my doorstep, it's a waste of good intel. He turned to his guards. Secure the vehicle. Bring the children to the East Wing. Do not wake them. Wait. Julian scrambled up, grabbing Nikolai's sleeve before realizing the fatal error of touching an alpha without permission. He recoiled, trembling. I go where they go. Nikolai paused, looking at the mud-stained handprint on his expensive suit sleeve. He slowly raised his eyes to Julian's terrified face. A corner of his mouth ticked up, not a smile, but a smirk of dark amusement. You are in no position to make demands, little bird, Nikolai murmured, stepping into Julian's personal space until Julian was forced to crane his neck back. You walked into the wolf's den. You belong to me now. Your children, your breath, your very pulse. It is all mine until I decide otherwise. He turned on his heel, walking toward the mansion. Come, unless you prefer the rain. The interior of the Volkov manor was a stark contrast to the gaudy, gold-plated excess of the Valeni mansion. Here, everything was dark wood, velvet, and shadows. It was quiet, a tomb-like silence that spoke of disciplined power rather than chaotic noise. Julian was ushered into a guest suite that was larger than his entire apartment before he met Dante. He had been stripped of his wet clothes, showered, and dressed in a silk robe that was 3 sizes too big, clearly belonging to the master of the house. The scent of Nikolai was everywhere, wrapping around him, oddly grounding. The twins were in a crib brought in by silent staff, sleeping soundly. Julian sat by the window, watching the storm, his hand resting protectively on the crib's railing. The door clicked open. Nikolai entered, holding 2 crystal glasses of amber liquid. He had shed his jacket and tie, the top buttons of his shirt undone to reveal a glimpse of a tattoo on his collarbone. Drink, Nikolai said, placing a glass on the small table. It will calm your nerves. Vintage scotch. Wasted on a Valenti, perhaps, but you look like you're about to shatter. Julian took the glass with shaking hands. Why didn't you kill me? Nikolai sat in the armchair opposite him, crossing his long legs. Curiosity. Dante Valeni is a narcissist. For him to discard a prime omega like you. There is a story there. And I love a good story. He didn't discard me, Julian said bitterly, the alcohol burning his throat. He was going to use me. Use us. He cheated with the Lin family heiress. They want to merge the syndicates. The twins. They were the dowry. Nikolai's eyes narrowed. The air in the room grew heavy, the alpha pheromones spiking with sudden aggression. It wasn't directed at Julian, but the sheer force of it made Julian gasp. Children are off limits, Nikolai said, his voice dropping to a subterranean growl. Even in our world, there are rules. Selling one's own flesh and blood. He swirled his drink, staring into the vortex of the liquid. Dante has lost his way, and a king without a code is just a tyrant waiting to be beheaded. He looked at Julian, his gaze sweeping over the Omega's pale skin, the bruises under his eyes, the delicate curve of his neck. You have courage, Julian. Stupid courage, but courage nonetheless. Running to me was a gamble with odds of 0. I had no choice, Julian whispered. You always have a choice, Nikolai corrected. You chose the monster you didn't know over the monster you did. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I will grant you sanctuary. My men will guard this room. No one touches the children. And the price? Julian asked, knowing nothing in this world was free. Nikolai's eyes locked onto his. Information. I want the routes, the bank accounts, the safe house locations. I want everything Dante has ever whispered to you in the dark. You will strip him bare for me, piece by piece. Done, Julian said without hesitation. And, Nikolai added, his voice dropping to a whisper, you will stay here. Under my roof. Under my protection. You will play the role of my guest. When Dante finds out you are here, he will come for you. And when he does, I want him to see you standing by my side, untouched and unafraid. I want to break his ego before I break his spine. Julian swallowed hard. You want to use me as bait. I want to use you as a message, Nikolai corrected. He stood up, towering over Julian. He reached out, his calloused thumb brushing against Julian's cheekbone. The touch was electric, shocking Julian into stillness. Sleep, little bird. Tomorrow, we start the war. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension and strange domesticity. Julian expected a prison. He found a fortress. Nikolai was true to his word. He was ruthless in his interrogation regarding the Valeni business, spending hours with Julian in the study mapping out Dante's empire. But outside of business, Nikolai was complex. He was a man of rigid routine. He swam at 5 a.m., handled business until noon, and surprisingly, he insisted on dinner together every night. It was during these dinners that the slow burn ignited. Julian saw the way Nikolai treated his staff, with stern respect, not the abuse Dante favored. He saw how Nikolai would pause outside the nursery, watching the twins play, a look of profound longing on his face that he quickly masked. One afternoon, Julian walked into the library to find Nikolai sitting on the floor, holding Luca. The baby was chewing on the Alpha's expensive platinum watch. Nikolai, the butcher, looked up with a deer-in-the-headlights expression. He grabbed it, Nikolai said defensively. I did not wish to injure him by pulling away. Julian couldn't help it. He laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in months. The sound was rusty, but genuine. Nikolai stared at him, transfixed. The cold ice in his eyes melted, replaced by a heat that made Julian's toes curl. You should laugh more, Nikolai said softly, handing Luca back to Julian. Their fingers brushed, lingering a moment too long. It suits you better than fear. It's hard not to be afraid when the world wants you dead, Julian replied, clutching his son. Let the world try, Nikolai said, standing up and smoothing his suit. I am the one who knocks at the world's door, Julian. As long as you are behind me, the world cannot touch you. The dynamic shifted. It wasn't just protector and refugee anymore. It was charged. Stolen glances across the dinner table. The accidental brush of shoulders in the hallway. Nikolai bringing home toys for the twins, ridiculously expensive, hand-carved wooden soldiers. But the bubble had to burst. It happened on a Tuesday. The alarms blared, shattering the peace of the estate. Gunfire erupted at the main gate. Julian was in the nursery. He scooped up Leo and Luca, his heart hammering against his ribs. The door burst open, but it was Nikolai, not an intruder. He was armed, a customized assault rifle in his hands, a handgun tucked into his waistband. Get to the panic room, Nikolai ordered, his face a mask of combat readiness. Dante is here. He found us. Julian gasped. I let him here, Nikolai admitted, his eyes hard. It was time to end this. Julian felt a surge of betrayal. You used us. I am protecting you. Nikolai roared, grabbing Julian's arm. But to kill a rat, you must put out cheese. Now go. My best men are at the vault door. Do not open it for anyone but me. He shoved Julian toward the hidden panel in the wall. Julian stumbled back, looking at Nikolai one last time. Come back, Julian whispered. Please. Nikolai's expression softened for a fraction of a second. I have something of mine to claim, Julian. I always come back for what is mine. The door sealed shut. Inside the panic room, time lost its meaning. Julian huddled with the crying twins, listening to the muffled thuds and explosions above. Every vibration in the floor felt like a death knell. He couldn't just sit there. He couldn't be the passive Omega Dante had trained him to be. He checked the monitors on the security console. The cameras showed chaos. Smoke filled the hallways. Bodies, both Valeni and Volkov, littered the grand staircase. And then he saw them. In the main atrium. Dante was there, screaming orders, his face twisted in a manic rage. He had a hostage, one of the young maids Julian had befriended. Nikolai was opposite him, behind a marble pillar, pinned down by suppression fire. Come out, Volkov, Dante screamed. Give me my property, and I might let you die quickly. Julian looked at the gun left in the emergency cache of the panic room. A Glock 19. He knew how to use it. Nikolai had taught him the basics 2 weeks ago, insisting that asterisk, pacifism gets you killed. Asterisk. Stay here, babies, Julian whispered, tucking blankets around them in the deepest corner of the vault. Daddy has to go help the bad man. He keyed the override code. The door hissed open. Julian moved through the service corridors, a ghost in the smoke. He emerged on the mezzanine overlooking the atrium. Dante had the gun pressed to the maid's temple. Nikolai stepped out from the pillar, dropping his rifle, his hands raised. Let her go, Dante, Nikolai said, calm, eerily so. She is nothing. You want me. I want my whore. Dante spat. I want to flay the skin from his back for embarrassing me. He isn't yours, Nikolai said, his voice dropping an octave. He never was. You didn't know how to hold him. You held him like a possession. I hold him like a partner. Partner. Dante laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. He's a breeder. A hole. That's all. Bang. The shot didn't come from Nikolai. It came from above. Dante screamed, dropping his gun as a bullet tore through his shoulder. He spun around, looking up at the mezzanine. Julian stood there, the Glock smoking in his hand. His face was pale, tears streaming down his cheeks, but his aim remained steady. "I am not a hole," Julian said, his voice ringing through the silent hall. "I am the father of your children, and you will never touch them again." Dante stared, shock replacing the pain on his face. "Julian? You shot me. You cheated on us, Dante." "In every way a man can cheat," Julian said. Dante reached for his fallen gun with his good hand. "You ungrateful bit." He never finished the sentence. Nikolai moved with the speed of a viper. He crossed the distance in a blur, a knife flashing in his hand. He didn't just stab Dante. He tackled him, driving him into the floor. The sound of the blade entering flesh was wet and final. Nikolai twisted the knife, leaning close to Dante's ear as the life faded from the Valeni Don's eyes. "I told you," Nikolai whispered. "I keep what is mine." Silence reclaimed the manor. The maid sobbed quietly in the corner. Nikolai stood up, wiping the blade on Dante's expensive jacket. He didn't look at the body. He looked up at the mezzanine. Julian dropped the gun, his hands shaking violently now that the adrenaline was fading. He gripped the railing to stop himself from falling. Nikolai didn't take the stairs. He vaulted over the debris, rushing up to the landing. He reached Julian just as the Omega's knees buckled, catching him against his chest. Blood soaked Nikolai's shirt, Dante's blood, but Julian didn't pull away. He buried his face in Nikolai's neck, inhaling the scent of sandalwood and iron. "You left the room," Nikolai scolded, though his voice was thick with emotion. "You disobeyed a direct order. I saved your life," Julian sobbed into his chest. "You did," Nikolai admitted, his arms tightening around Julian, crushing him close. "You foolish, brave, beautiful creature." Nikolai pulled back slightly, cupping Julian's face with bloodstained hands, smearing red on Julian's pale cheek. It looked like a war paint. It looked like a claim. "He is gone," Nikolai said fiercely. "The Valentis will scatter. The territory is mine. You are free." "I don't want to be free," Julian whispered, looking into those glacial eyes that were now burning with fire. "I want to be here, with you." Nikolai closed his eyes, resting his forehead against Julian's. "Then you stay? You stay, and we raise those wolves in the nursery to be kings. And you rule by my side. No longer a pet. A queen. Is that a proposal, Don Volkov?" Nikolai captured Julian's lips in a searing, possessive kiss that tasted of violence and salvation. When he pulled away, his smile was terrifying and tender all at once. "It's a promise. And that is how the wolf of the north stole the heart of his enemy, not with chains, but with the freedom to choose." If you enjoyed seeing Julian finally pull the trigger and take back his power, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, if you were Julian, would you have pulled the trigger or let Nikolai finish the job alone? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,